If there is one thing that this movie proves, is that the MCU nerfed Nia DaCosta, because she got the sauce. I was not the biggest fan of 28 Years Later, but after watching The Bone Temple, I'm actually excited for Chapter 3. I am very intrigued into how this trilogy is going to wrap up. Thank you, Nia DaCosta. So 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple is the sequel to last year's 28 Years Later, which is the sequel to 28 Days Later and 28 Weeks Later. The film is directed by Nia DaCosta, and it stars Alfie Williams, Jack O'Connell, and Ralph Fiennes. Dr. Kelson finds himself in a shocking new relationship with consequences that could change the world as he knows it, while Spike's encounter with Jimmy Crystal becomes a nightmare he can't escape. So The Bone Temple quite literally picks up right where the last film ended, and I appreciate that. The problems that people had with the first 28 Years Later are little or non-existent in this sequel. Not only is The Bone Temple the best installment in this trilogy so far, but quite literally this is the best film since 28 Days Later. One of the biggest pros of The Bone Temple is the story is actually consistent. The narrative here is a lot more condensed and more focused. The first 28 Years Later had two different storylines that kind of just felt like things were happening on the screen for the sake of it. In particular, the first act just kind of felt like whatever, but the second act is where we get an actual story. In The Bone Temple, there are two separate storylines, but they merge so fluidly. But not only do they merge together so fluidly, both of the storylines are very intriguing on their own. You have Dr. Ian Kelson trying to develop essentially a cure for the infected, and then you have Spike suffering through the 9 circles of hell. Both stories were great, but I think I was the most invested with Dr. Ian's story. That cure storyline could really play a huge role in Chapter 3, but given how things played out in The Bone Temple, I don't know how that's gonna flow. Once you see the film, you'll know exactly what I'm trying to get at. Hopefully. The entire cast was fantastic. I love how Jack O'Connell is slowly becoming the face of antagonists slash villains, because he plays that part so well. You have this broken man who becomes a satanic cult leader whose entire philosophy is based off of Satan and the Teletubbies. This is the last person you want to encounter in the apocalypse. And of course, Ralph Fiennes as Dr. Kelson was awesome. I love how off first glance Dr. Kelson looks so intimidating, but once you get to know the character, he's one of the most wholesome people in this entire universe. I love how all of the characters in this movie are just going through some level of suffering. Meanwhile, Dr. Kelson is making breakthrough research and having the time of his life. This is random, but when this image of Dr. Kelson hit the timeline, I legitimately thought he turned in the end. I'm sitting up here like, did they just spoil something that major? But once you see the movie, it all makes sense. And honestly, that scene was pretty fucking cool. I can't lie. Now, with this being a 28 movie, of course there's going to be blood and gore and zombie violence. And as you can imagine, there is. But I would argue there's not really a lot of zombie gore in this movie. I mean, yes, there is zombie gore in the movie, duh. But I feel like it's not as excessive as one would think. If anything, this movie focuses more on the dark side and the light side of humanity. But one thing that is very consistent in this movie is the tension, because oh my goodness, the tension in this movie is bonkers. Anytime this guy is on screen, I am literally gripping my chair. Imagine you and your family have gone this long surviving out in the apocalypse, and this random crazy guy with his whole crew of blonde wig wearing people, and then they come in your home and just take over. Being put in that situation is more terrifying than the infected. But real quick, I want to go back to the zombies. The Alpha, or Samson, I believe his name is. Yeah, your favorite nude zombie is back at it, but he actually has a pretty important role in this movie. There is a scene where the character does something, and I swear to you, I heard a gasp in my theater. If there is one scene I could compare that to, it's when Caesar said no for the first time in Planet of the Apes. But this movie perfectly sets up Chapter 3. In fact, there is a huge cameo in the last 5 minutes of the film. This is like a major MCU type cameo. That's how huge it was. Guys, that cameo did get me hyped. I'm not gonna lie. The only major problem that I have with this movie is shaky cam, but I mean, at that point, that's kind of the style of these 28 years or 28 weeks or days movies. That's just the style of these movies. But even with Nia DaCosta directing this movie, I feel like the shaky cam was kind of taking a step back a little bit. Like, it's still present, but it's not as like overly excessive, you know what I mean? And I appreciate that, because that shit will give you a headache. But in the end, guys, The Bone Temple was pretty awesome. This film is a lot more focused, more condensed, and a hell of a lot structured than part 1. I still believe this is the best installment since 28 Days Later, and I will stand on that. In fact, some of you could argue this is better than 28 Days Later. That's one of those takes where it's like,
I can't co-sign that, big brother, but I ain't mad at you for what you do.
Regardless, I would recommend The Bone Temple for sure. So plugging 28 years later, the Bone Temple. Into the rank system, I am placing this one into the Pinnacle Zone. But yeah, y'all, that is pretty much my review for the Bone Temple. Let me know down in the comment section below what you guys thought about the film. Did you love it? Did you hate it? What are you looking forward to in Chapter 3? Whatever you thought, let me know down in the comment section below. And as always, guys, leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more, and I will see you all in the next one.